Hi everyone, and welcome to StudioJake Movie Makeover Masterpiece. On this podcast, we take a film that on paper should have been good. Maybe it had a dynamite director, an awesome cast, the trailer just dazzled you, but when you saw it, whether at home or in the theater or you saw it through a streaming service, whatever the case may be, you were like, where did this go wrong? Myself and a special guest, we're going to be talking about these movies, where they went wrong, and how we can fix them. So sit back, relax, and welcome to StudioJake Movie Makeover Masterpiece. Following Disney's acquisition of LucasFilms in 2016, the Mouse embarked on an ambitious journey to continue the Star Wars franchise. The trilogy featured The Force Awakens, directed by J.J. Abrams, The Last Jedi, directed by Rian Johnson, and The Rise of Skywalker, also directed by J.J. Abrams. Unfortunately, Disney decided to retcon several ideas and characters within the Star Wars galaxy, putting a sour taste in many fans' mouths. While the films had a stellar cast, the writing proved troublesome, with The Last Jedi facing the most scrutiny for what was perceived as a betrayal of Luke Skywalker, turning the Jedi hero into an isolated grump who tried to kill his own nephew. As such, The Rise of Skywalker became a confused mess as it tried to recapture the essence of the Force that had been left behind. Joining me today to talk about the Star Wars sequels and how to fix them is my friend and fellow author C.S. Johnson. As usual, plenty of spoiler alerts for this podcast. C.S. Johnson, tell me, how do we fix this Star Wars sequel trilogy?
Okay, I have one big answer, one big fix for the whole thing, and it's so controversial you'll get banned, I think. So, all right, so the easiest fix to make it and I'm going to preface this with, there's no way to fix these things. There's a time and a place where it's just better to put the animal down than it is to try to fix it, But if you're going to make it at least 20% better, the easiest way to do it is to gender swap Rey and Kylo.
Okay. So why is that? Tell me how that would work.
Okay, so in the Force Awakens, okay, Rey and Kylo don't have any personality anyway. So well, I mean, I've talked about this before about with Captain Marvel. What was the point of making her female? There's no real point to that movie. If you changed her gender, that movie would be the same. It wouldn't change it. I mean, it wouldn't change at all. Nothing. I mean, maybe that guy wouldn't tell her to smile more. But it's nothing would change. And honestly, with Rey and Kylo, if you swap them out, and I honestly think they'd be okay with that. I mean, Adam Driver seems like the kind of person that would be like, hey, you want to make me a female in this movie that I've already done? All right, go for it. And Ridley would be like, yeah, I can be a man, because I'm a feminist. And that's exactly what feminists want of women today. We should be the men. So it's it would be an easy fix. But the other thing to it is it would give a lot more gravitas to the series. So you, instead of having Rey connecting with Han on a father-daughter level, you'd have Han with the son that he never had. I mean, you could even call her Rey still.
Right.
So Rey, and so this is something that I think a lot of women, have experienced, is their fathers want sons, So that kind of gives that Han more of a character development hold in Rey. And then Kylo, who I'm going to call Kyla at this point, Kyla would have much more of a counterpoint to Princess or General Leia at that point. You would see the whole fight for the galaxy as this huge mother-daughter misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. And then everything else kind of fits much better. Rey as a loner wouldn't have a lot of friends. Having Finn around would be oh, it's friendship on a nice level. Having Poe around with him, it's almost like Poe and Kurt almost. So you could have the buddy that challenges you, the buddy that agrees with you, the kind of who is the more emotional one, the follow along, the one that wants to do the easy thing, the one that wants to do the hard thing, that's adventurous, the risk. You could have much better dynamic between them as a unit. And then on the other end of it, so for Kylo Ren is arguably the one that has the strongest arc throughout the series anyway. So
Right.
I think that's another kind of favor to the gender swap option. The character is very well written, and there's like a clear kind of fall and redemption arc throughout the series. Whereas with this newcomer that really nobody really knows anything about, you can kind of see the everyman person better fit into that, with friendship, with family, like establishing a new family, the loss, the suffering, the trials, learning much better. And it would make the dynamics that happen between Rey and Kylo much more realistic. Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens as he is now is not really a threat to Rey, because she pretty much beats him in the last kind of like big lightsaber duel, the whole thing. And as I know, he's like already tired, and he fought Finn, and he just killed his dad, and Chewie turned on him and stuff and everything like that. But it's like, if he believes in what he's doing, he would probably find the energy to beat her, and he didn't. So it's like, well, that's not really that impressive then, Kylo. So by making him a girl in this one, you'd have more of a logical explanation of why Rey would win that battle. Because men are just typically stronger, typically feminists, and it just, at that point he'd be fighting for, it'd be fighting for the loss of a father figure, which is something I think more men identify with anyway. I also know from, my own experiences and my own writing and stuff, that women have a strong bond with their fathers, but it's less, it's less kind of like primary is what I'm kind of going for. So that's kind of how I would fix the whole thing. I would just swap them out. So that way you could kind of see, again, the family dynamics, with Han having a son that he, never had, that he always wanted. And then the loss of that to his daughter, who feels betrayed by him and abandoned by him, which, again, that's something that, as a girl, Kylo would feel much more strongly, especially with the mother directly opposing her too.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have, of course, the Rey and Kylo dynamic with all of that too, is more, it's much more of a dark romance, explicitly in that kind of the write-up that they have. I know there's like not a lot that you can do with the series, especially since Carrie Fisher's gone, and Harrison Ford has kind of voiced, or not voiced, his reluctance to return to form. So,
I have actually an idea that I think would have fleshed out the series, and now I want to run it by you, and you tell me what you think as a writer in a story.
Yeah.
My issues were, I felt like the biggest betrayal for me was with Luke Skywalker, because being a young man, you think Han Solo was cool, right? You want to be Han Solo, but you identify more with Luke Skywalker. And I actually heard George Lucas say he wrote it like that intentionally. And it's same with, you want to be Batman, but you identify with Spider-Man, right? That's typically how it works. And I feel like, for me, seeing Luke Skywalker's, the way they just maligned his character was just awful. And I feel like if they didn't want to make it where Luke had rebuilt the Jedi Order, because then they thought, oh, well, that might undercut like how we're going to bring back the Empire as the First Order, and we need a resistance. I don't know why they didn't call it rebellion. But anyway, neither here nor there. I think that what they should have done is made it where Luke Skywalker was still around, and it wasn't until he realized that he couldn't stop the First Order that's when he went away. Because, you know, it's just kind of like, oh, he got the SADs. And you're like, well, yeah, but there was no reason for his SADs. It's, you know, he was going to kill his own nephew. What a horrible thing. You know, it's kind of like, so to me, I think if they had fixed it where maybe someone close to him had died in like a flashback, I guess, and that's why he went away. So maybe, and then Kylo Ren feels betrayed that Luke didn't stay and finish his training, and so then that's when Snoke swoops in, or Emperor, the Emperor, whatever. I actually didn't have a problem with them bringing back Emperor Palpatine as long as he was a clone. But when they said, "Oh no, he's the real Emperor," that's when I was like, okay, well, whatever. Anyway, I'm sorry, I said that reversed. Actually, I said that reversed. They find out he is a clone, not the real. It was so complicated, but anyway, all the retcons.
A lot of retconning in their own advertising.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my whole thing. But I really feel like that would have given the reason why he self-isolated more meaning. So it was kind of like, oh, he saw Snoke subtly influencing Ben or Kylo. Well, okay, well, here's how you solve that problem. You go find Snoke. You don't kill your nephew. I mean, that's like, you know, that to me, I think if they had tweaked that, I feel like it would have corrected way more in the story. I feel like it would have made The Last Jedi, which is I'm sorry to all you prequel haters, The Last Jedi is the worst movie in the Skywalker saga, hands down.
I second that. I'm like,
there you go.
So,
and
I will rewatch the prequels if I have to, but I barely.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. So, what do you think about that idea? If they had tweaked Luke, I think the story would have flowed smoother. I think it would have made more sense. What do you think about that analysis?
I honestly think his character was thoroughly assassinated. I almost feel like the thing. And this is something I think as a culture, it speaks to the cultural narrative, especially the feminist meta-narrative, where all men are bad, all men are failures, all men are these ignorant people that are weak and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, you know how it goes.
Right.
And, I live in a world where I have a wonderful husband and I'm raising a son. And it's like, that's not true. I know it's not true. This is BS, And the idea, I think, to kind of that they used with Luke was that, and the thing is like you can have a failed hero, that's what like the people that go all in, those last stand kind of people, I think you can have a failed hero, very well written and done, but this was kind of like, and you can kind of see this in Star Trek Picard too. Yeah. It's like heroes kind of just give up, and it's like, well, and I understand it because like it's very, very popular. The hero's journey, kind of as a narrative, is very well known, and it's come to the point where, people have forgotten, I think, what happens to the hero next. Okay, right. And so they become. I mean, and usually what happens is the evolution of the hero. It turns into the mentor figure, which is what that is supposed to do. I mean, if you look at Yoda from the originals, that's kind of what happened with him. Count Dooku failed, and Yoda kind of struggled to get back. I mean, he didn't see the deception of the dark side, and he went into exile. And I mean, instead of making him essentially redeemable, though, like Yoda, they made Luke into this bitter curmudgeon, very disillusioned and kind of just like awful Black Mirror parody of himself.
Right.
And so to fix Luke, I would honestly say I'd have like if Snoke was kind of manipulating Kylo, I would say have Kylo attack him first and misread the situation. And Luke to feel guilty to Kylo attack, and then Luke respond and kind of fight for his life, maybe injure him, and then feel guilty because he didn't intercede with Snoke's like trying to influence Kylo sooner. It's like
Mhm.
it's kind of like the mother guilt.
Right.
You know, oh no, my child got hurt, and if I just been there a second sooner, this never would have happened. It's all my fault, and I experience this every day of my life, of course, because I have 2 children. So I think, I mean, you can, and then to go in, of course, so I mean, Kylo really only tells Rey that Luke attacked him, but it's like, if he attacked him and he didn't remember attacking him first, that would make more sense. Was,
Mhm.
oh, Luke is defending himself and forcing him. And that's another explanation of, like, he would fight back, he would injure him, he would win. Kylo would run away because Luke would be, like, shocked that he, like, actually injured him. And then when Rey fights him later, that would also give him a more reasonable excuse for losing to her, because he doesn't want to hurt her the way that he hurt Kylo, especially if they are this, like, dyad of the Force and power and whatnot and everything.
That makes sense. And also, I also feel, I think that everything seems to undercut, especially the original trilogy. So it was, they defeat the Empire at the Battle of Yavin, and I'm sorry, Endor, not Yavin, Endor. They beat the Empire there. They destroyed the second Death Star, and I feel like because in the books they have this continuation where, like, Grand Admiral Thrawn, he takes over the Empire, and you find out that Palpatine, the name escapes me, but he had a secret apprentice who he was training to kill Darth Vader, because he sent, because he wanted to have a backup plan, and he has all of these secret apprentices. Mara Jade Skywalker, who is a beloved character from the expanded universe, she, of course, is one of these secret apprentices. So I think that one thing that it wasn't clear, like, who Snoke was, and Rian Johnson, the hack that he is, just said it doesn't matter. And but no, we needed to know that, because we needed to know why things went from good at the end of Return of the Jedi to bad in The Force Awakens. And why is The Force Awakening? Why did it go to sleep? That's another thing, that even the title itself doesn't make sense. With Episode 1, people made fun of the title The Phantom Menace, but it is a Phantom Menace. They don't know if they, after the Battle of Darth Maul, they don't know if they killed the Master of the Apprentice. So who is this Phantom Menace way out in the galaxy? Attack of the Clones, kind of a cheesy title, but that's exactly what happens. That's the climax of the film, the Attack of the Clones. Revenge of the Sith, that goes without saying. Yeah. Revenge of the Sith is by far, in my opinion, the best of the prequels. And for me, I felt like when I watched, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. I say this in my review, which I won't regurgitate my review. You can read it on my website. But one of the things I said was I felt like the Rise of Skywalker should have been in the middle. And without all this, because they try to conclude the prequel trilogy, I felt like if it went from Force Awakens to the storyline in The Rise of Skywalker, and then had a different, more defined ending, I think it would have been better. Just completely frog leap over The Last Jedi. Of course, they couldn't do that, but I think that because even my wife said when we left the movie theater after seeing The Rise of Skywalker, she even said this would have made more sense if it had been right after The Force Awakens. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what do you think about that idea? Like I'm saying, take out all the conclusive stuff, and that way you can go on into a third film. But what do you think about that?
I think they would have had to make Snoke a more definable enemy. I mean, like the Emperor, you kind of knew that he was like a representation of the ultimate enemy, which is tyranny. And because he was the leader of the Empire was, using Darth Vader to maintain control, and they had all the stormtroopers, and they were tightening their fists,
Right.
It made sense for him to be the ultimate bad guy. But we don't, even in the original trilogy, you don't learn anything about the Emperor until, other than like the Emperor's behind Darth Vader's authority. And then you see him, of course, in the second one, and then he shows up in the third one. I mean, like, in the second one, he's just a hologram. So it was kind of like this progressive, like, little rabbit trail of breadcrumbs that led you to the ultimate unfolding of the big battle. And that's why, like, thematically and scripturally, you know, it made sense. You know, it made sense that he would have to be defeated. With this trilogy, like, I honestly think that they looked at a lot of different things and they were like, oh, this would be good Twitter points, or this would be good, this would look really cool.
Right.
And
well, and visually, which we'll talk about this more when we get to the directing side, visually, they're phenomenal films. Like, they look great special effects wise. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Oh, no. It's like, it looks busy. It's like a Transformers movie. I mean that in the worst possible insulting way. It's like, oh, there's the pretty girl. Oh, there's the racially diverse person. and I mean, like, there's no American flag for Michael Bay, but it's still like, it's a very odd collision of what they think people would look good, what would sound good, what would make a great trailer line, a lot of snark and a lot of, and ultimately I think a large reason why people hate this one so much is because there's just no cultural underpinning that it can speak to.
Well, it's like, I think you were the one who pointed this out, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was you, is you were talking about why the original trilogy and the prequel trilogies resonated with the culture. And you pointed out that, you know, in the original trilogy, it's about kind of the spiritualism, it's about and at the time when the movies were coming out, America was kind of having a resurgence and, you know, in their religious longings and whatnot. You know, we're talking about the time of the TV preacher, right? But then when the prequel trilogies comes out, it focuses more on science. So they give a biological reason for the Force and everything in between. I think that was you who said that. And I thought that was a very, I thought that was a very good point, you know, and, you know, even with the casting, right? George Lucas casted that film with people who were relevant, you know, and, Samuel L. Jackson, Natalie Portman, and a lot of people don't know this, but Hayden Christensen wasn't originally supposed to be Anakin Skywalker. It was a different actor who actually sadly died before production began. But it was another kind of one of those. He was oh man, it's driving me crazy. His name escapes me, but he was in Sidekicks with Chuck Norris. He played the boy who idolized Chuck Norris.
Okay.
Jonathan Brandis. He was originally supposed to be Anakin Skywalker, but he passed away, and the other actors that Lucas had in mind all had moved on, except for the soap opera star from Canada. So, but to Hayden Christensen's credit, I thought the acting was a little hammy in episode 2, but I thought he did better in episode 3, to be fair to him in that regards. But to me, like you said, how they made the cultural relevance was important, but with the sequel trilogy, they were trying to appeal to the Twitter culture, the social media culture, and not to the culture at large. And was it you who said that? I'm curious. Was that you who pointed that out?
And honestly, like, they succeeded to an astounding degree about division and cynicism and this kind of woman don't need no man sort of culture and you know, let the past die and then, like, you milk it for all it's worth, you know.
Right.
It's like zombie cow milk. Does the trilogy endures because it's grounded in something higher than us. This will be quickly forgotten, like Eminem's last rap song album. Okay, I mean, really, this speaks to the worst of our culture. This division, putting men and women against each other, and putting, oh, Finn is this, stormtrooper who breaks away, but all these stormtroopers are dying. Isn't that great? This utter confusion and hypocritical thinking and retconning right away. I mean, on a dime. it really did, and like you said earlier with Luke Skywalker, this idea of character assassination. You can't be good anymore, let alone great.
And it's something they pointed out in Bounding into Comments has really been on topping this. I always shout them out because I think they're fantastic. Only new besides Bleeding Fool, and my own website, the only 3 nerd sites you can trust right now. But one of the things they point out is even in the novels, they're trying to undercut Luke Skywalker's legacy. They wrote a novel recently where these rebels are talking about Luke Skywalker and about how they look up to him, and then no, I know Jyn Erso's the real person who defeated the Death Star. And I like Jyn Erso. I'm a huge Rogue One fan. I think it's a fantastic film. But even I get the underpinnings of what they're trying to do with that unraveling, because as wonderful as a character as Jyn Erso is, and same with Luke Skywalker, they don't have to be at odds with each other. Jyn Erso is the one who communicated the plans to the rebellion. Fantastic. Luke Skywalker is the one who put those plans to fruition. Again, fantastic. But I don't think they have to be at odds. We don't have to say one is better. Personally, I think Luke is better than Jyn Erso, but I'm saying if there are people out there who like Jyn Erso better, she's a well-designed character, and I know that every Rogue One hater out there is screaming their guts out, but I don't feel like those characters have to be in conflict because their movies were totally different, and Rogue One is not part of the Skywalker saga anyway. But anyway, off that rant.
It's a good comparison. I mean, it's a good comparison to I think it's Hetty Gabler, when she was a German actress, I think, if I'm thinking of the right person. Mommy brain might elude my correct shit. So, but anyway, she escaped Germany, and she actually helped build the first kind of radio wave system, so they were able to kind of intercept German airships a little faster. But you would still credit, Charles de Gaulle and all these other people, and it really has become like this war of who's the biggest hero, and it is it does again speak to the lowest kind of ugliness of our culture, because these people are working together in the end. It is because Jyn did this that Luke was able to do this, but Luke still had quite a big part in taking down the Emperor and everything else. And I mean, ultimately, Darth Vader is the one that did that, if we go by what's actually canon.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now, I want us to transition a little bit, because this is where I actually bump heads with my fellow sequel critics, is the casting. And I actually like the casting. I think Adam Driver is a good actor. I think Daisy Ridley is a good actress. And the list goes on. Maybe even Laura Linney is a good actress, but who plays Admiral Holdo, of course. But these characters fell victim to bad writing, and it had nothing to do with their skills in acting. And I think that if with the character of Admiral Holdo, she was just what every leader should not be, is what she was. And again, we get accused, when people say this, we get accused of being sexist. And it's nothing against Laura Linney herself. It's nothing against the actress who played Rose Tico and so on and so forth. It's just that they were good actors who got bad writing. In my humble opinion, what do you think about that? Or do you disagree with me? Is there someone you would have recasted?
I mostly agree with you. I think you can have a bad actor and still get a good writing, you can still get a good production out of it. As with the charges against sexism, I think it's easier sometimes to say, with Laura, the Admiral
Holdo.
Yeah. Yeah. It just doesn't want to come out, does it?
Yeah.
No, I think if you said, well, if you had a man cozying up to a general leader, and the general suddenly went down, and she was promoted or he was promoted after having this long-standing friendship with somebody, and then didn't communicate any real plan, for the situation that he was in charge of, and sowed so much discourse and unease among the people that he was leading that it led to a mutiny, which seemed reasonable.
Right.
Do you still think that person would be a good character?
Right.
And I mean, it's the same thing that people talk about all the time. Like, one of the things that I found really interesting was after Donald Trump won the election, they gender swapped the debates between him and Hillary.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of heard it more clearly and was like, and I think, the big even Mark Hamill, I actually got a lot of Twitter love for calling him out on this, but he said once that Congress had over 100 women and something in it, and he was proud that the women would take the lead and stuff. And I said, considering what Kathleen Kennedy has done to the Star Wars prequel, I'm happy to believe that women can be just as bad as men. And and I think ultimately it ends up hurting women too, because I want to know as a woman that I can fail, that I can still be loved even if I make mistakes, or even if I'm intentionally awful to a degree.
and really too, it speaks to, I just did some research for an article I'm writing about how comic book fans are leaving comic books and turning to manga and anime. And one thing that you note in, I'm going to use Fairy Tale, it's an anime, it's a fantasy anime, is there's this character named Urza Scarlet. And I actually, for those of you curious, I have an article about her, because her power is she can change armors. So I have a list of her top 10 armors on my website, so go check this out. And one of the things about her is she's this tough, rugged, kind of almost tomboyish woman who can even roughhouse, and she beats up Natsu and Gray, the two main characters, all the time. However, there's a scene where they're on vacation basically, and she passes this dress shop and she sees a wedding dress, and the first thing she does on vacation is buy this wedding dress. And also there's some episodes where she attempts to cook and poisons everyone, not to death, but they all just get food poisoning. And so even though she's this real tough, brawny kind of woman, she still is feminine in certain ways. She still has a desire to be a wife. She still has a desire to and I hate to use cooking because I know every feminist on YouTube is going to screech at me over this, but I'm just using that as an example. And so even though you have this obviously very powerful woman who defeats demons and wizards, she still has those qualities that make her a woman. And it's the same with the men in the case of Fairy Tale as well. And so I think where particularly Disney is going, the direction they're going, is they're falling for that. Let's just morph everyone until we're all what's the word, androgynous. And that. What do you think about that? Do you think that has something to do with that? Because for me, Daisy Ridley, very lovely actress. She looks very lovely, and to me, if they were trying to make her more of a man, then they should have picked an actress who looked more mannish, because you like you were saying, not mostly in The Last Jedi, but she has these moments where you can't really tell the casting wouldn't have mattered. So what do you think about that? I'm curious.
I thought Oscar Isaac was really well cast.
Yes.
He'll have work for years.
Yes, yeah.
He and Antonio Banderas, frankly, have to team up at least one movie, and I'll go.
For sure.
And so, and I thought Daisy Ridley was it was kind of a similar. I thought she was very she did harken back a lot to Luke Skywalker originally,
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that they did a good job with kind of. I mean, it's obvious that they wanted it to be a female, but they still wanted her to eventually rise to the status that Luke does in our culture today. You know, like where we love Luke Skywalker in the original. We love that even though he's kind of like this whiny kid who doesn't know what he's doing, and he lucks out a lot and he has good friends that can help him, he still believes in the good of somebody who everybody else at that point has given up on. And he still believes that good will ultimately win, and it does. And you know, I think with Rey, they wanted to kind of do the same thing, but so, you know, I think Daisy Ridley is a very lovely actress, like you said. I think she looks really good in the part. I just don't think that her character is particularly well written. It's and the thing, and I've told people this before, you know, you can't just gender swap somebody and expect the same thing to work, and that's it. That's all you change. I actually was talking about this last night on another podcast about how women aren't funny the way that men are. And I mean, like, and when people hear me say that they always stop after funny, where it's like women are funny. And it's like, no, I'm not saying that women are not funny the way that men are funny. And I can point this out very obviously with The Office and Parks and Rec. There's a reason that Leslie Knope running Dunder Mifflin would not work.
Right.
And it's not just because one's in Pennsylvania and one's in Indiana, and there's so much forth. You know, so Luke Skywalker and Rey Palpatine just doesn't. You just can't make it work because you want it to. And I think that's the biggest lie that the sequel trilogy does, is like, we want this to be like this, but it's not like that. And honestly, the biggest shock for me, frankly, was that Dark Side didn't win. I was just like a little surprised. So
Yeah, and that makes sense. And we're going to go to the final section, although I'm going to make an executive decision and not make it the final, because I just thought I want to ask you about some of the rumors. But first, I want to get so we're going to do a bonus round. But first, I want to talk about the directing. Because J.J. Abrams, for me, is a very hit and miss director. So, like, he'll do, you know, Star Trek, and it'll be really good, or Super 8, and it'll be really good. But then he'll do, you know, the third Cloverfield movie, and you're like, what the heck was that? You know, and so whenever it was announced that he was going to reboot Star Wars, I was a little disappointed, because the rumors had been circling that it was going to be Steven Spielberg. And I was excited because real Star Wars fans had been waiting for a Steven Spielberg Star Wars since the 70s, you know, but George Lucas, you know, at one point was for the original trilogy, he was blacklisted by the Directors Guild, which Steven Spielberg was a part of. So he couldn't do that. And then the sequel trilogy, of course, he decided to direct himself. And so the Steven Spielberg Star Wars film, hopefully we'll get that someday, whether it's a standalone or not. But anyway, so I feel like like you were saying, with J.J. Abrams directing The Force Awakens, I thought he would have I was prepared to enjoy it. I thought it was going to be good. And with The Force Awakens, I didn't think it was bad. I just thought it was mediocre. I didn't think it was a best foot forward kind of film. Now, of course, everyone knows my feelings about Rian Johnson. I think the man is a hack. He's one of 4 big budget hacks in Hollywood that are active today. Although technically Lars von Trier, I guess he's technically in France, but still, I think he's a hack. He just makes. Oh wait, I can't say. You know, he makes adult films, but then he puts a Hollywood budget behind it, and then he gets awards at all these film fests. But he's not. He just is Joe Sarno reincarnated. But anyway, and then Colin Trevorrow, who directed Jurassic World, was supposed to direct the Rise of Skywalker. It was going to be called Duel of the Fates originally. I think he's a better director than Rian Johnson. I'm not saying he's a great director or phenomenal or visionary or any of those titles, but I think he's a better director than Rian Johnson. And so I was sad when he departed. After they said that Kathleen Kennedy, they said that they started a rumor that they fired him because he did a movie that I guess wasn't that good. I haven't seen it. And then Then they said it was creative differences. That's the official spiel. But I actually have heard from someone who actually worked for Disney at the time say that they fired him because he was shown the rough cut of The Last Jedi and said, "This is garbage. I can't do anything with this. You've ruined my whole script." And that's when they fired him. So I'm curious, what do you think? Do you agree with me about the directors, or do you think it was just still like politics at play? And back to J.J. Abrams on the Rise of Skywalker, I honestly think that I didn't think it was good or great or even terrible, but I thought it was mediocre. What do you think as far as how the directors handled the films? How would you rate them? And do you blame them, or with Last Jedi I blame Rian Johnson because of all his all of his Twitter tirades? What do you think about that? Do you agree with me or disagree with me? I'm curious.
Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit with this because I could be, again, mommy brain, I'm sorry. But the original version of A New Hope, okay, the original version was directed by George Lucas, right? And
I don't think it was George Lucas. I know Empire Strikes Back was Irving Kushner, but I can't remember who directed New Hope. Maybe it was George Lucas. Hang on.
Well, I mean,
you're right. It was George Lucas. It was George Lucas. My apologies.
I'm pretty sure I'm remembering it right. No, so the first movie, okay, George Lucas directed it, and if you look at like all the deleted scenes and all the kind of extras that have come out, in the last, it was actually like the reason that the story works as well as it does is because of the editing, and it was actually his first wife, I think, that edited the film, and obviously she's not there right now.
Right.
So I have and between like the post-credit scenes and the rumor that like Luke dying was like added in post-credits or not post-credits but post-production, like, and like people like walking out of the theater, you can see Mark Hamill's face is like it's like he just had like a vomit sandwich. and I kind of think that it's more about the director is like the editing is like the icing that goes on top of the cake. So right. You have this really god-awful cake, but if it looks good enough, people aren't, they're not going to notice the bad parts as badly.
Absolutely.
And so for the director stuff, I thought J.J. Abrams was kind of a logical choice after Star Trek, and he has a point with the mystery box kind of approach. It's not good for landings. So he shouldn't have come back for the third film. And I think he really only did it because people realized at the end of The Last Jedi that there was no saving the industry. So they had to work with the good parts, and the good parts were what he did and the nostalgia that kind of went along with what he did. And I think that's kind of the reason that they brought him back for that. I think we'll see like kind of mediocre. I mean, the thing about being like Steven Spielberg and like Quentin Tarantino, for example, they have styles, they have their own personal hubris like imbued in every speck of the film that you see and stuff. And it's kind of like it is kind of like a Michael Bay movie where he is kind of like an auteur because he has a specific style. There are motifs, there are recurring themes, and the things that he did. I
don't believe in auteurs, by the way, but continue.
Well, I am an auteur. I just write stuff, okay? So, I mean, you can kind of, that no matter what you're working on as an author, there's something about you that goes in it. And I really don't. So I think JJ was a good pick for the first one. I have no idea where Rian Johnson came from, to be very honest. I know he's kind of like a wannabe auteur, and Knives Out was considerably much better after. But I mean, the thing about auteurs, and I say this like, I say this as a writer and my own self-critic. I don't think people are very good with sequels when they consider themselves like an auteur, because they have to be kind of like self-contained, especially and in Star Wars, as much as it is self-contained, it's every point it fits together in the original trilogy, and in the prequels, working backwards, every point reaches a particular point that it was always climbing to. Mm-hmm. With this one, what is supposed to be the end game exactly?
You're right.
I mean, that it's Rey Skywalker. I mean, what kind of hopeful vision for the future? Or, I mean, like, you walked away from the original trilogy knowing that, you know, the evil was defeated and good had won, and that was the Universal that sold it for 40, 50 years now.
You're right.
What what were they trying to say with Rise of Skywalker? What?
And also too, I think it goes to show you that, like, with Star Wars, now of course I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite because Empire Strikes Back is my favorite Star Wars movie, and it was not directed by George Lucas. He got an unknown director, an unknown B-movie director to pull it off, and it was the best Star Wars movie ever made, and I still contend that. And I just think that when it comes down to it, there's something to be said about cohesion, because there's where George Lucas was always in the planning room. So even though he wasn't directing Empire Strikes Back, he was still in the room. He was planning it out. And I honestly think with the sequel trilogy, they didn't have the whole story planned out. They were trying to do the Marvel thing where they're like, okay, we're going to give this director this character to film, and that way we can film two at the same time, and then we can release two the same year and beat out everyone else. And that's a fun strategy for Marvel, because they can, with Marvel superheroes, you can have a contained storyline. And I think this was a mistake Warner Brothers made with the DCEU, is they should have taken advantage of that more. Whereas Star Wars, you can't do that. You can't have a contained storyline unless you're doing like a Mandalorian or a Rogue One. But part of the main trilogy, it's just not possible. So I just think they didn't have a plan, and so they just said, okay, JJ, you've got Harrison, you've got Han Solo, Rian Johnson, you've got Luke Skywalker, and at the time, Colin Trevorrow, you've got Leia, and then of course Carrie Fisher passes away, and that throws those plans into chaos. What do you think? That's what I think. I just think that they weren't planning the thing together. What do you think?
Oh, definitely. You can tell it's such a clash of ideas. I mean, I will say that The Last Jedi looks nice. It's very
sure. Very visually stunning.
Yeah, it's not in a spectacle CGI sort of way. You know, it looks genuinely artistic, but it's so hollowed out with like cynicism. More that it's almost like having like a really nice wine bottle and it's filled with like liquid pee or something.
Right.
It's just this absolute crap, and even though it looks very nice, it's just still absolute crap, and it really ruins it, and I think the directors
sorry to interrupt.
Well, I mean, the directors didn't have any shared vision. They didn't seem to like each other. I mean, I've heard that the most, like, the reason that people like Rise of Skywalker slightly better than The Last Jedi is because it was basically the middle finger to
Yeah. Well, on set that Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, and John Boyega, and I think Oscar Isaacs, none of them liked Rian Johnson. They didn't like working with him, and they were making fun of him so much on the set of Rise of Skywalker that a producer from Disney walked up to him and said, "We're going to start docking your pay if you keep making fun of him." So that, I don't know if that story is true. It's kind of apocryphal, but that's what has trickled down from all the rumor mills.
Well, and there's something to be said for notoriety instead of actual competency. So,
right.
I know that there's some very very good writers that I just don't agree with.
Right. For sure.
And,
Same here.
yeah, and so it wouldn't shock me that, you know, Star Wars is kind of like a film of the people, and Rian Johnson made it all about himself.
Right.
So, I don't really think that made, you know, and I'm sure that his name will be on a lot of people's mouths because of that, and a lot of, you know, probably the woke Hollywood, the Hollywood people will like that, and he'll probably get more work from it. So.
Yeah, for sure. And especially because I haven't seen it yet. I actually had another movie reviewer review it for me because I didn't want to see it. But I probably will eventually watch it. But one final point on this. I'm curious your thoughts. Is one thing that I have said is because The Last Jedi is a very nihilistic film. And my problem with that, and this is also why I didn't like Polar, which is a Netflix action film. I wrote a review for it when I was still with the Daily Wire, so you can check that out. But one of the things that I think is that nihilism doesn't work in film. It can work in other art forms, but the problem with nihilism, unless it's a comedy, so if it's like Seinfeld, yes, nihilism, because it makes life funny, that it doesn't mean, for those of you who don't know, nihilism just means life has no meaning.
Yeah,
and I felt that way about The Last Jedi, but the problem with that is it clashes because according to the Force, there is hope, there is light, there is darkness, and so I feel like nihilism, when it's put in a serious movie, then and where your life means nothing, then the movie means nothing, and so then what's the point of watching it? And that was. But in the case of The Last Jedi, it was nihilism was kind of clashing with the light side and the dark side of the Force. I'm curious, what do you think about that? Do you think I'm right? Because anytime I watch a movie, especially European cinema, whenever I watch these movies that have these nihilistic tones, I'm like, what is the point of this film? Because nothing means anything. That's what the tone of the movie is telling me. So what do you think?
Oh, well, I mean, like the kind of like the contradiction of nihilism is that you use it to find meaning a lot of the time, and
right.
it's like, oh, life is meaningless, so I guess my life is meaningful because it's meaningless. This is just like,
well, that's the Jerry Seinfeld angle, right? You know.
Well, and there's a charm to, you know, unpredictability and absurdity and everything else, because like logic kind of, you play with it a lot of the time when you see something like Seinfeld. You're playing with people's expectations and like kind of like the inner flaws of man, like the Costanza element.
Right.
You know, but when you have, as you say, you know, with the Force, especially since Luke has grown in the Force for the past, you know, 40-some years, you know, and to kind of just toss it all away and see it as a curse when he knows firsthand the blessings that it's brought other people is like, I feel like a lot of people, especially in the divided times that we face, you know, with Donald Trump as president, you know, and it doesn't matter what side, if you're on any or not, we live in a world without nuance.
All right, so we're going to go to this bonus round because this is where we're going to talk about the rumors that surrounded the production of this series. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask CJ, I'm going to describe a rumor to her, and I'm going to let her decide if it is fake, if it's false, true, or maybe, and she can explain why. So I'm going to save the best one for last. I'm going to give you three big ones, okay. And you'll have to tell me what you think. So the first one is that originally J.J. Abrams, after The Last Jedi, you know, you see the scene where Luke disappears, he becomes one with the Force. So there was a rumor that J.J. Abrams wanted to do, because by now Colin Trevorrow has been fired and all this, he wanted to do it where Luke actually didn't die, he didn't become one with the Force, he teleported himself to another location, and that was how they were going to explain that he was in The Rise of Skywalker. So do you think this movie is or this rumor is about the movie is true or not or possible?
It's definitely possible. I mean, The Last Jedi was like they had nothing left after it. Nothing. Rey wasn't trained. You know, nothing. Leia was gone by that point. You know, like before the time. You know, is December of 2016. Yeah. So they had to scrap everything. So yeah, I could see them kind of pulling a like a dream sequence kind of.
So here's rumor number 2. Are you familiar with Star Wars Rebels at all, by any chance? Okay. So the animated series Star Wars Rebels, it's set during episode, or the last season is set during episode 4, but I think it's like leading up, was supposed to lead up to the events of episode 4, something like that. There is a sequence where the main character, he unlocks a force portal, and it's one where you can see veins in time and could possibly alter outcomes, but not without consequence. Like, you can't just go in and change it and everything's hunky-dory. And he even thinks about, because in the show, he's the apprentice of a rogue Jedi, and that character, spoiler alert, dies. And I should have put a spoiler alert at the head of this video. Anyway, there's but anyway, so he tinkers with the idea of altering the past. So there, now I actually think this for even me. I'm thinking this is so wishful thinking. Some people think that the writers at Star Wars Rebels saw the direction of the films, because they're still Lucas. You know, the people working on the films now are actually from Disney, not from LucasFilms. You know, I mean, like, overseeing it. Yeah. And so they introduced this concept into canon, because according to Disney, everything is canon. That's from Disney, obviously. So do you think that they're using this as like a wild card for if they want to change the timeline and rewrite and make a new sequel trilogy? What do you think? True, possible, false?
Well, if the cow is breathing and still has skin, yeah. So cash it out. You know? Milk that sucker till it's gone. So you pull out the boogers, you know? It's
yeah, exactly.
You know, honestly, like the thing about like a big company, like, honestly, Disney's too big to fail. You know, that's really what it comes down to. And they still have to make money, though. And I actually, like, part of me is tempted to be like, God is angry at us for the Disney sequels, so he sent Corona to shut them down.
I love it. All right. So this is the biggest one. And this is one that for me personally, I think it's not true, but I'm hoping that I'm wrong, okay? So, you know how there's Release the Snyder Cut, supposedly, for Justice League. Supposedly there is a George Lucas cut of the Rise of Skywalker, where, because I guess they had him as like a general overseer of the film, and Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger were there, like, what's the word, like, basically micromanaging Abrams during the production. But for a couple of months they had to go, like, to Disney, and so Lucas, while he was there, was approached by some of the other producers and were like, hey, would you recut this? So Lucas recut the film. He made it, I think they said something like 15 minutes shorter, but introduced a new character who was one of the survivors of Luke's Jedi Academy, that was like loyal to Skywalker. And he didn't know Luke had died, but then he felt it in the Force, and so now he's decided he's going to come out, and he and Rey kind of have like a competition on who's the true heir to the Force, and he battles Kylo at the end, not Rey. Rey fights the Emperor, and it was a totally different take, but as soon as Bob Iger got back, he made it disappear. But supposedly there is the Rise of Skywalker Lucas cut. What do you think about this? Do you think that this is a possibility? Do you think it's not true? Do you think it's a maybe?
I think it's the kind of question that George Lucas at Comic-Con will draw on ticket sales to answer. So,
I love it.
as if I have been very cynical about this, it's because how could you ruin Star Wars for people who have loved the series for 40 years? We're very forgiving. Obviously, the prequels weren't all to everybody's taste. But I mean, like, they're okay enough that the storyline continues and stuff, and it's just, how could you ruin this? You know?
And also to me, how bitter the fan base is divided too is what bothers me, because when it became with the prequels versus those who like them who don't like them, I always use this analogy. It was like a paintball fight. So you go into it and you might get a little bruised and you get paint all over you, but you came out alive and ready to start all over the next day. But with the sequel trilogy, and I blame this on these SJW maniacs. They have turned it into a knife fight where you could get stabbed. And I think that's, so it went from being this fun to, oh my gosh, that person just pulled a knife. Like that's how I feel about the fan base of Star Wars. What do you think about that?
I definitely think that the SJWs, they tend to view words as violence, and they're prepared to do violence to stop you from using your words as violence. Right. And I think that's utterly incoherent when you think about it.
Yeah, that's true.
And it is a very nihilistic sort of way of looking at things. Honestly, really, words are going to hurt your feelings,
Well, words can hurt your feelings, but it's what you do after they get hurt. Are you going to sit there and cry about it? Or are you going to dust yourself off and be like, okay, they're just words. They didn't actually do physical damage. Let's move on.
Yeah, and I mean the kind of like the spirit of manners and cordiality and stuff has really deteriorated, and I think social media is to blame for some of that, but it's also to blame with just there is not a lot of things today that you can really be mad at, I think, and it's an outlet for kind of like that rage. Yes, there is injustice in the world, and yes, there are people that suffer, but when you can sit at your keyboard and yell at the world through Twitter, it seems much easier to fix those things for some reason, or at least forget about them. And and I think that's really kind of it's like a lazy activist sort of form, and unfortunately, I think that's kind of that's just how it's come. And how do you come back from that? We can't come back from that. It's like The Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker. And that's why people are starting to get frustrated, and they're like, it's a movie for children about space wizards. And it's like, it's not just a movie for space wizards. Yeah. For children. Yeah. And there's a lot more behind it. Do I think that there's a George Lucas? Maybe. I don't know if the Snyder Cut is real, to be very honest, either. So I don't think that would help the situation here.
Well, like I said, I don't think it's real. I think it's just wishful thinking. But I'm hopeful. Maybe someday it'll come to light. Like I actually hope the Snyder Cut of Justice League comes out so I can prove everyone right that it's not that great. But anyway, neither here nor there. So any final words, CJ, for our discussion about the Star Wars sequels?
I don't know. Maybe somebody on the internet can gender bend Rey and Kylo, and we can see, and we can like compare them. So I am kind of tired of like gender washing stuff, though, and movies like are an art form, and it feels like it's become more of a product. And I don't feel this way. I don't feel the same way about a sheet of toilet paper like I feel about a painting, or I'd hope not, at least. And it's getting to that point.
Well, I I have a different perspective on that because I'm in marketing and PR. So my perspective on that is that films have always been marketed and PR'd and all that from the dawn of time, but ever since film became a film. But that's not to say I disagree with you that it's art. I do think film is art, but I think my perspective on how they're changing the branding, because to me art is a product. It's just who buys it.
I kind of disagree with this because like my biggest competition, like there are what in the writing business there are content farms. There are people that will write your books for you and then you could just sell them. And some companies have admitted to just changing names and changing like one or two other details in the books and then putting them out. It's like, how do you compete with that as an artist? And it's really, there's no heart, there's no soul, there's cash and cash and cash. And at some point, it does get to the point where it's like, this is a product and this is art. And I, like I do know that content race is not going to subside. We're consumers culture. That's how we express ourselves, in all these different ways, whether it's film or it's writing. And you're going to have some films that are just bad because they'll sell, Yeah,
that's true. It's all in. And I also think that has to do with the shifting of, I'm going to go see this movie because Tom Cruise is in it, to I'm going to go see this movie because it's a Marvel film, right? That before people went because they liked the people in it. So you all, like everyone went to see John Wayne films, right? And then it became, but then Westerns kind of died out and whatnot. So it became more about, not even about the genre, more the setting, which I read someone made a good point about why The Mandalorian is so good is it doesn't treat Star Wars like a genre. It treats Star Wars like a setting. And so that's why you can have like a sci-fi Western in the Mandalorian. So that's all great stuff as usual. So C.S. Johnson, where can people find you?
You can find me on the internet, on my website, csjohnson.me. I like to make the joke that it's because I'm a narcissist. So, but csjohnson.com is a like steel manufacturing company. So csjohnson.me, and then on Twitter, Facebook, and my Ko-Fi page, it's just at csjohnson. So
awesome. And of course, you can find me everywhere. I have reviews for all three of these films. I'm not going to regurgitate them here. You can go to my website, jacoberry.blog, to read all about them. And of course, I'm on Twitter, Parler, and Instagram. They're all three at Real Jacob Airy, and you can find me on Facebook, author Jacob Airy. So, CJ, thank you again so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you.
Everyone. Oh yeah, anytime. And everyone, of course, I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.